know what really makes us mad? Is wasting money on CDs with only one or two good songs.
Yeah. Tell them about punk.
What's up, posers? Welcome to Punk Lotto Pod. I'm your co-host, Justin Hensley.
I'm your other co-host, Dylan Hensley.
And this is the show where we choose 1 year at random and select one punk, hardcore, emo, or punk-adjacent album from that year to discuss. And we are here with an episode centered around the year 1985. And we'll get into all that kind of stuff later. But if you head over to patreon.com/punklotopod, you get access to all of our weekly bonus audio. Where last week, what did we do last week?
What did we do last week? Oh, news of the world. You always say last week, and it was what we recorded 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, because I post the Patreon audio the day we record it, and then I edit and post the main episode the following week. So yeah,
I guess I also just forget what happened on the other side of the sandwich that I ate between recordings. The last thing I remember was pita with hummus.
It's like everything you eat just wipes away the memories that you just formed. And if you really want to forget something, you just run and eat something really quick. I don't want to remember that. Quick, hand me a bag of Lay's. Yeah, we did a news of the world. We also did some predictions for 2025. Not a lot there. We mainly talked about our predictions for 2024 and how wrong we were.
How wrong we were, yeah. How off base we were. Yeah, predictions. Do you got predictions? Hit us up, social media, or leave a voicemail. What do you think is going to be big in 2025?
Yeah, because we have no idea. Not that it really matters what is big, because we tend to not like what's big. So I don't know why we care.
I think the big trend is going to be something that sucks.
Yeah, most likely is what it will be. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of fun to try and make guesses on what's going to happen. But I think it's because of what we had in 2024 made it kind of hard to even figure out what direction the next year is going to go. So yeah, our predictions aren't that great. We do talk about a couple upcoming albums that we're interested in, or just that are on these anticipated lists. So a lot of that over there, patreon.com. You can also join at our $5 tier, where we do the listening club /producer tier. And we have not selected our album yet for the month of January. We're waiting to see if there's going to be a record that's going to be interesting enough for us to all talk about, but that might not happen, and we might end up just choosing an older album, but we'll let you know. But also, as a producer, you get your name said on the show, so let's do that now. So thank you to our producers, Dave Brown, host of the podcast One Band Five Songs, and writer of the blog Oklahoma Lefty. Thank you to Steve Long, host of the podcast Rebel Rock Radio, who I will be doing something with very shortly. And thank you to Jason W., writer of the newsletter Songs About Chocolate and Girls. All excellent places you should go follow and check out. And you can join at our $10 tier, where you get to choose the album we devote an entire episode to, which we did last week. We discussed the Gits album, Frenching the Bully, and that was brought to you by our patron, Zach. So all that is Punk Lotto Pod at Patreon. You mentioned voicemails, and we actually got this voicemail a month ago in December. But I never could find a right moment to play it and listen to it on the show. So I figured I might as well play it now. And I haven't listened to this myself. I read a little bit of the transcript of it, but I have not listened to everything. So going in blind, and maybe cut it if I play it and I don't like what it says. Well, thank you, Micah. I wish we would have got to this sooner, but it didn't really pan out. But yeah, he sent that in December, right before Christmas. And thank you. It's funny that the Demon Hunter episode was the first episode you listened to, because that is one of our least popular records from that year that came out that we talked.
Yeah, that episode didn't do particularly well.
Yeah, it's not really our main audience wouldn't really cover that record or listen to that record. So yeah, so that's funny that's the starting point. But nice to know we weren't off base with that album.
I do suspect that Ryan from Demon Hunter has listened to the episode, though. Steam shot out of his ears. I don't know. Who knows? I mean, I generally expect most people we ever talk about on the show to have listened to our episode. It's the risk we take.
Yeah.
And we've only been yelled at once.
Yeah, honestly. Well, we
We
were
did.
yelled at twice for the same episode, but
Right. Same person.
a year apart.
Yeah.
But yeah.
There's other factors going into that.
Yeah, that's a weird one. But yeah, nobody else has ever reached out to us. I do think Mike Herrera listened to us
Yeah.
because I found a Bremerton listen like the same week as after that episode went up. It's like, oh, if it's not Mike himself, it's his mom or somebody in Bremerton who knows him.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's been a couple like that before where I was like, we got to listen in this place that's not, pretty common for us.
We have gotten positive feedback from people that we've talked about on the show.
We have. Yeah, we have.
We've gotten DMs from people saying like, yeah, you guys were on the mark, or like, oh, here's some info that maybe you didn't know, just like, here's some extra, which is it was always really nice to get. But yeah, we really appreciate the voicemail, and I am always happy to hear from someone else who recognizes the quality that is hidden in the Tooth and Nail solid state discographies, because there's great stuff that we've talked about on the show, and we're always kind of like, trying to convince people like, no, you gotta listen to it, I swear.
Yeah,
the Splenderhead record's great.
Yeah,
they're like, they were on Tooth and Nail.
Yeah, it is funny. Sometimes we do get asked by regular listeners and people who've even been on our show. They'll be like, so they're a Jesus band, right? Like one that we covered. It's like, yeah, kind of. And then we had to get into like the specifics of, well, they're not exactly, but yeah, definitely did do some of that.
But yeah, also truth to the fact that there's plenty of cringy stuff.
Oh yeah,
on Tooth and Nail. It's in that world of Christian rock and Christian punk. Yeah. Also, yeah, fellow Frodis fan, welcome.
Yeah. Frodis seemed to escape the pull of the Christian band label over the years.
Yeah, when they had built a little bit of a name prior to it, and then like the follow up was released on Fueled by Ramen, the last album. So they've managed to get some recognition for credibility, but then they weren't a Christian band at all.
Yeah. But yeah, we appreciate the voicemail. We appreciate that we help you get through the day, because that is 100% a thing that when I listened to podcasts at my last job, podcasts got me through my day. So I 100% appreciate that, because that is something that I've definitely felt myself. So it's a little cliche, but it's a cliche because it's true, I think. So thank you for the voicemail.
If I could listen to podcasts at work, I would probably listen to more podcasts.
Yeah.
Because I did listen to some podcasts when I was working at a job where I could listen to headphones.
Mm-hmm.
As 8 hours of music. It's just like, I'm not enjoying this.
No.
I'm not absorbing any of this.
But yeah, if you want your voicemail read out on the show, read out. Me just reading a
transcript of a voicemail.
Or a telegraph. Punk Lottopod, stop. But if you want your voicemail played on the show, send us a message. It's 202-688-PUNK. That's our number. It's easy to remember. Give us a call. And depending on what you say, we'll put you on the air. But thank you so much. And I guess we can get into the rest of the episode. So 1985. This year we have covered a handful of times in the past. So previously, we discussed 1985 in the episode number 253 about the cult's love. And that was a Halloween Spooktacular episode in 2023. That's a while ago. Episode 237, we did something that I don't know what it is. It says various, and it was a Patreon preview. So we must have, what did we do from 1985 on Patreon that I didn't write down what it was? Funny. Episode 196, The Smiths Meet His Murder. We did that with Johnny? A Peroxide Blonde? What were you going to say?
Was it a bracketology?
Oh, that is probably what it was.
Yeah, it was the 85 bracketology.
That is right. Yeah, so that was a little Patreon preview there. Episode 138, we did New Order's Low Life. We did that with Jonathan Ford of Unwed Sailor. Speaking of some Tooth and Nail bands that didn't get some attention or do.
Speaking of Frodis Connection as well, I just saw a post today on U District House Shows Instagram. It's like an account that sporadically posts like flyers and pictures from old house shows from like the Seattle area, I think. that a lot of the Tooth and Nail bands played at. And they posted the Roadside Monument tour laminate where it was like Roadside Monument on one side and the back side of it said Roadside Monument. And there was in the body of that post, they talked about Jonathan Ford got the nickname Unwed Sailor from one of the members of Frodus, which is where the name of the Unwed Sailor band came from.
Oh, that's funny. I don't think I knew that.
I think I'd heard that before and I forgot it. But yeah, they called him Unwed Sailor because he didn't have a girlfriend and he wore a pea coat a lot.
That's funny. Episode 107, we covered Flip Your Wig by Husker Du, and we did that with 2/3 of the band Wife Patrol, who I believe they have finished their second record. We should be getting that this year. And then for some reason, we waited 101 episodes between these, but episode 6, we did the Dam's Phantasmagoria, as well as Genocide's Violent Death, which was like a demo from like a pre-Repulsion lineup. But yeah, that was in our first 10 episodes, so bet that's fun. But all right, 1985, what is going on this year?
Yeah, so you mentioned it. We talked about Meat is Murder by the Smiths before, and yeah, I'm glad that I never have to listen to another Smiths record again. That's my hot take. I wish I could never hear the Smiths ever again.
Yeah, they're one of those bands that's just like too big at this point, where it's like you're just gonna hear them in places.
I don't want to hear their songs. I don't want to hear covers of their songs. Just I'm over it. I don't care about it. I don't care about it. I don't like it. I don't like Morrissey. Can't stand Morrissey.
Yeah.
And everything else about them, majorly overrated. That's my opinion that will have people to come with pitchforks and torches for me, but
it's funny. Like, I guess because we never had a Smiths moment, it makes my disdain for them more. Because it's just like, I learned about so much of the bullshit about Morrissey before I ever even tried to listen to their music. So it was one of those cases of I don't have to listen to this band. He's a bad person. So like it's I don't have to go back. I have no nostalgia for it, so I'm free from that. But even then, there are bands that I do like that have done things that I don't listen to anymore. So yeah, I get it. People have an attachment to them, but
and it's more than the Morrissey. I guess it's for me. It's like because you'll be like, oh, I hate Smiths. People will be like, oh yeah, Morrissey sucks. I'm like, yeah, Johnny Marr overrated also.
And that one will get you some real heat.
Sorry, just my opinion.
So one of the records that I was considering choosing myself was the Jesus and Mary Chain debut, Psycho Candy. And I sent you that list of options. And what was your response to it?
Yeah, but you hate Psycho Candy.
Yeah. And I told you, like, I don't hate the record. I just like the other ones more.
I do like the other ones more. Also.
No, it's a good record. It's just a lot noisier than what they did later. But yeah, that was one that I was considering. We'll probably do that record one day.
Yeah, we will. I mean, we're kind of running out of the stuff that we have done. Getting a little short in options.
Yeah, in the 80s, yeah, it's a little slimmer pickings there because you only have so much to choose from. We have The Cure's The Head on the Door, which features Close to Me. Is that a song I know?
I've heard Head on the Door. It's fine. I don't know what the standout singles from that record are, though, because it is still a little early for The Cure to have like big singles, because Just Like Heaven is on the next record.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I don't know. Head on the Door is fine. It's a enjoyable enough record. I have heard it, but I don't remember anything distinctly from it.
We got two Can't Get Into It bands back to back here for me. Sonic Youth released Bad Moon Rising, and their replacements released Tim. I think I do feel like I come up to so much resistance whenever I say I don't like Sonic Youth, and like I always get somebody saying, "You don't like this? You don't like that?" I was like, "No, I don't like any of it." I've tried. I do not enjoy them.
I do not like Sonic Youth and Ham.
Yeah.
Sam I Am. Yeah, Sonic Youth just doesn't. It's whatever.
And then replacements. I don't know. This one actually mystifies me. I don't know why I cannot get into the replacements. I've tried. There's things I like. There are songs that I liked by them, but I've yet to find an album from them that I enjoy listening to. So I don't know why that band is so hard for me to get into.
Yeah, I've never connected with Replacements. And Replacements, now that's when I'll say I'm not a fan, but I am apologetic about that. I'm like,
yeah,
I should be a fan of the Replacements.
Yeah, I'm in the wrong on that one.
But I've listened
I will fight you on the other ones.
All of their significant records, and I just don't.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it is.
I've heard those three. I mean, I've heard those three in a row. Let It Be, Tim, Pleased to Meet Me. It's just fine. I don't know.
The Fall released This Nation Saving Grace. This is one of the more important Fall records, and
that's a really good one. That's one of my favorites that I've heard.
Husker Du also released New Day Rising. We covered Flip Your Wig, and this is during that time period where Husker Du was just cranking these records out and had 2 in 1 year. So New Day Rising, which was the follow-up to Zen Arcade, and a classic.
Yeah, certainly one that, how many? We have done like 3 Husker Du records at this point.
We've definitely, let's see, let me pull up their their Rate Your Music page. We covered Everything Falls Apart. That's the first one we did. We've done Zen Arcade, we've done Flip Your Wig, and then I did a bit on Candy Apple Gray on one of the solo pods I did. So we've covered most of them. So
yeah.
New Day Rising is like the big one we're missing.
They might be, looking, like I said, slimmer pickings, from 85. Like in terms of like what we would choose that would not be repeats. So like Husker Du is always going to be lower on the list of priorities coming back to 85 because we did an 85 Husker Du record already and we've just done them so many times on the show. But there's just like, that's kind of where we're getting close to having to do more repeat artists on this year. And it's not like we come to this year that often, but
yeah, apparently we've taken really big gaps on this year for some reason. Just timing wise, I guess, didn't quite work out where it got hit as many times. But there's a really big record that I was considering choosing, and that is Rites of Spring by Rites of Spring. I think that one was one that you were like, we should probably do that one. And I was like, we should probably. But I want to do the one we're talking about today. But I do love this album. This record is like perfect. And it's a singular release. It's a major record, super influential. It's good. So yeah, it's kind of a no-brainer. It probably will get picked the next time we hit 1985.
We can't forget that we also spent a good chunk of our time on that New Order episode talking about Diff Juzz.
Yeah.
So I think we can safely check them off the list for this year. But I mean, yeah, I'm not champing at the bit to talk about a DRI record. It's not a. There's some really good stuff, and you kind of like highlighted most of the ones that would be priorities to talk about in your almost picked. But what else did you almost pick?
The only other one that I almost picked that we have not discussed is Food for Thought by Grey Matter.
Yeah.
Very much the exact same wavelength as Rites of Spring, part of that Rev Summer wave. And Grey Matter is the one I've spent probably the least amount of time with. I've listened to that record before, and I've heard other stuff they've done before and enjoyed all of it, but I've not really looked into them very much. I haven't spent a ton of time with any particular record from them. So they would be another really good option for us to hit up in the future. So we got a few things there that we, could hit up.
Like the Worst X record.
Oh, yeah. Ain't Love Grand was released that year. Yeah. What else? Some noteworthy records. We can save the SST stuff because I've got a little bit of that on a rundown of SST in 85. But I Don't Want to Grow Up by the Descendants would probably be a fun one to do if we were to hit up Descendants again. I would probably wait to do a Descendants record again with a guest, though. We could do that terrible Clash record, Cut the Crap.
Yeah.
That record that people hate. Which makes me wonder, like, am I going to really, really hate it?
Yeah, I think you'll dislike that one. If I had to guess.
Frankenchrist by the Dead Kennedys was also released that year, which is like my third pick for Dead Kennedys albums. Funnily, we've done my least favorite Dead Kennedys record. We did Bedtime for Democracy. and none of the first 3 so records we like better. But that was a guest episode, so. And I don't even actually hate that record. The record's just, I think, is a little samey. That's that record's problem. Frankenchrist is like, all right, the bloom is coming off the rose a little bit. It was just kind of like, oh yeah, more of this, just without some of the more memorable tracks.
You don't remember Chicken Farm? Yeah.
I remember Jacko-Rama. That's a pretty standout one.
Soup is good food. Hell Nation.
Yeah, it's
MTV,
solid.
Get off the air.
Yeah.
Stars and Stripes of Corruption. Yeah, I remember that one. I remember Frankenchrist pretty well. And that's also a pretty notable record for being the obscenity trial record, right?
Yes, because it had the insert.
The H.R. Geiger. Geiger.
I've heard both, but I've always said Geiger. All right, if this was your turn for 1985, what record would you have selected for us that we maybe haven't already mentioned?
Oh, yeah, I was going to say probably one of the ones we've talked about already.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what's left that I would choose from, I guess we'll probably hit Realm, Sodomy, and the Lash by the Pogues on a St. Patrick's Day at some point.
Yeah, probably.
So I'll exclude that one, but that's probably one of the more notable records to talk about. I don't think I like it, but that Beat Happening record might be one to talk about. That Meat Puppets would be one to talk about.
Yeah.
I think that would be a Meat Puppets record I would be interested in listening to. It's one of the more important ones. One of the higher rated ones. And I guess it could be interesting to talk about Big Lizard in My Backyard by the Dead Milkmen, but it's not because I think I'll enjoy it.
That is the record to do from them.
Yeah.
It's the one that I've gotten the most enjoyment out of listening to as well. Don't love that band. I guess it's kind of, is that blasphemous to say? I think everybody kind of likes Big Lizard. It's like the record. People.
I don't think it's blasphemous to say you don't like Dead Milkmen. I think it's pretty fair to say in 2025 that you don't think that most of the Dead Milkmen's material has aged well.
And you know what's funny is I can't name any like super fans of the Dead Milkmen. Like I don't know anyone who's like super into the Dead Milkmen.
Yeah.
That record, that's like the one that people listen to. Some people listen to Beelzebubba, I guess.
My only other pick, this would be my pick. I think this would be my pick, would be Fear and Whiskey by the Mekons. That's a good one. Kind of important to, it's kind of one of those background records for alt country. Yeah, I think that would be my pick.
Yeah, 1985 is kind of the beginning of the falling off point for a lot of punk and hardcore, especially in the US. And then we're getting into
died in 85, 86.
Yeah. But it's where the sound starts to evolve a little bit into like, that's where college rock starts to really come out of this stuff. There's a new wave of bands that crops up within like the next few years, like your new, your youth crew bands and some other genres like, like ska, third wave ska taking off. That's pretty important to the late 80s. But yeah, college rock seemed to be the more like dominant sound for alternative left of the dial style music. And yeah, 85 is like, we're starting to run out of some of these first wave bands' best material, But let's get into the album we are talking about today. So I had the year 1985 and I selected Three-Way Tie for Last by the Minutemen. Stats on the band. The Minutemen were from San Pedro, California. They formed in 1980, and this album was released December 1985 on SST Records. This is the band's third full-length album and final. And the person on this record is D. Boon on guitar and vocals, Mike Watt on bass, guitar, and vocals, and George Hurley on drums. And the record was produced by D. Boon and Mike Watt, as well as producer Ethan James, who was a member of the band Blue Cheer and owned the studio Radio Tokyo. And James had previously produced a couple tracks off of Buzz or Howl Under the Influence, and he produced all of Double Nickels on the Dime. So we have previously discussed Minutemen on a different podcast. We guested on an episode of Spinning Out, and we talked about Double Nickels on the Dime. And I remember thinking, like, after we did the episode, and like anytime seeing the Minutemen pop up in feeds where I was like, well, maybe, or lists where maybe I would consider choosing one of their records. One of the things I kept thinking is, man, we gave away their biggest record to a different podcast. We didn't save it for ourselves. But in case you never listened to that episode, I guess we could do a little bit of our rundown of our background with the Minutemen. Do you remember listening to the Minutemen for the first time, or when you would have first started getting into them?
Maybe I said it on that episode, but I don't distinctly remember right this minute. I mean, I would have been familiar with Corona because it was the theme song of Jackass.
Yeah.
So that was probably my introduction to them. I probably found out that was a Minutemen song pretty early. Otherwise, I distinctly remember. I do remember you getting really into them before I had really listened to anything on my own. That's my recollection of it, is that you got super into them and was listening to them in the car and would play them and recommend them. And then I remember listening to the earliest I really remember listening to their albums would have been listening to Double Nickels sometime in college.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat when it comes to remembering when I first got into them. It definitely would have been in college, right when probably my first semester there, getting access to high-speed internet and figuring out how to download music for the first time would have been where I would have really dug into them. And yeah, I knew Corona, the song for Jackass, but I also don't know that I knew that it was the Minutemen until I heard it for the first time in full by them. So that might have been the first time I was like, oh, I know this song. Because I remember having a distinct record. I was like, this song is the Minutemen? That was my thought whenever I think about the first time hearing that song. And then it would have been at the same time where I was just getting into everyone. It definitely would have been getting into the Dead Kennedys and Black Flag and, Minor Threat, and just trying to absorb as much of the first wave of American hardcore as I could at that same time. And having just a handful of songs from across their catalog and really enjoying those tracks. It would have been the big songs, the songs that kind of most people know from their discography. And Doubles Nickels on the Dime would have been the album I listened to in full for the first time, primarily because it was always talked about as, this amazing record that, has stood the test of time, have been super influential and highly regarded critically and as well as by the fans. So that would have been my starting point. And it was probably the only thing I listened to from them for a while. But once I really got into everything, yeah, the Minutemen became one of my all-time favorite bands. They're in my personal all-time top 5. I would put them right behind Superchunk and Teenage Fan Club, number 3, all-time favorite band. And so yeah, I've spent so much time with their entire discography, all their LPs, and I've heard every single EP. A lot of them I haven't listened to, a ton, but they're just so short. But yeah, Minutemen were always a band that I definitely gravitated towards. I think Dead Kennedys were the I guess Misfits, then Dead Kennedys, and then I settled on Minutemen. And Minutemen is the one that I still go back to and listen to. I don't go back and listen to Dead Kennedys ever. And I listen to Misfits at Halloween, and that's kind of it. And a lot of this other, Black Flag, I guess, I don't know. I don't tend to go listen to Black Flag on my own. I usually do it for the show, but
yeah. I don't go out of my way to listen to Black Flag records anymore, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's because you've heard them all a million times, and you know what to expect, and you know the records pretty well. But yeah, Minutemen is one that I can kind of go back to, regardless.
Yeah. So I did a little Last FM and Tumblr triangulation. Ooh. I listened to I love having, I swear to God, if Last FM ever goes away, it's going to be like the burning of
The libraries of
the
Alexandria.
libraries of Alexandria. It's like the personal devastation and loss of like personal music listening history. I can't. I love being able to just go see what I listen to on a day. Then I can figure out like, oh, the first time I listened to Double Nickels on the Dime was August 23rd, 2009. So like probably a week into the semester, 2 weeks into the semester, downloaded Double Nickels on the Dime, listened to that whole thing. And then I went back and looked at my Tumblr archives, and I reblogged someone on September 9th, 2009, who posted the album cover of Double Nickels on the Dime saying greatest record of all time. And I reblogged it saying agreed. Less than a month later, I'm like, that's a great album. Best of all time. So, I mean, that's the impression they made, though, immediately. Upon listening to that record, I'm like, this is incredible.
Do you remember the first time listening to this record?
No, not really, but I remember getting really into the later stuff, the Project Mersh EP and this album in like 2015 probably. I just spent more time with their discography. Like I think I heard this record while I was still in college, but got really into it while I was working at the bank. Really just kind of like all the later stuff, and like got way more into them as a band in like 2014, 2015, I feel like. Because I think I watched the Minutemen documentary like the summer before I got married in like 2012. So that filled in more of my knowledge of the band and like informed more of my interest in the band, and it just kind of grew from there. But I definitely spent a lot of time with them in like 2015, 2016, just kind of like digging through their discography and being like really into the later stuff, especially. Yeah,
I was trying to remember the first time I heard this record, and I do have a distinct memory of it being after I watched the documentary. So for some reason, I was probably just mostly only listening to Double Nickels. Like, I love the first two records. They're both excellent albums, but they're also just like so short that I didn't put them on that often, which I find very funny that I'm like, no, I need to listen to the double LP way more than the two LPs that I can listen to, and still less time it takes to listen to Double Nickels. I think just Double Nickels just kind of consumed me for a while there. I definitely would call it one of the greatest albums of all time still. And it is the one I would spend the most amount of time with, just over and over and over again. So then I would dip into the first couple, but then for some reason I would never go on the other side and listen to Three-Way Tie. And in fact, I remember maybe hearing the first track on this record in the documentary before hearing the record. So yeah, it took me a while to get into this later period, but looking, at their discography, it is the stuff I prefer the most is Double Nickels to the End, more so than the first two records. Like I said, the first two records are really good and really fun, but they're super short and very samey. And there's like standout tracks for sure on both those albums, but they kind of just did the same thing a couple albums in a row. So there's not a ton of variation in sound on those albums. So yeah, I came to this one late in my fandom of the Minutemen.
Lost on the freeways again, looking for cars to an end. Nobody knows which way it's gonna bend. Lost on the freeways again.
So let's do some backstory on the band. D. Boone and Mike Watt were childhood friends, and they wound up learning how to play their instruments together. And there's fun stories about them as kids in that documentary. But they famously didn't know the difference between a guitar and a bass. And they just thought it was, some people like to play 4 strings and some people like to play 6 strings, and that's kind of it. And they didn't know how to tune their strings. They tuned all the strings to the same note, and just fun kid stuff that you don't really get with a lot of other bands, digging into their childhood friendship. And prior to starting the Minutemen, all 3 of the members were in a group called the Reactionaries with vocalist Martin Tamburovich. And he would later go on to be one of the co-owners of New Alliance Records, which is the record label that D. Boone and Mike Watt started later. So the Reactionaries break up, and Boone and Watt are like, let's start a new band. And they're like, hey, George, you want to play? But George had already signed up to play drums in another band. And so they were like, all right, well, we'll get this guy. He was just like a plumber. Like, that was his trade. And they like rehearsed with him a little bit. He played some shows with them, but he hated the punk scene. And at the time, the punk scene was real gross. That Southern California punk scene where they're just like spitting on each other all the time. Yeah. He was like not a fan of that and so quit. And then eventually they were able to get George to agree to come and join the band. The other band, I think, wound up falling apart. And they would play their first show with Black Flag. Imagine that being your first show. And they started releasing a series of records. They released their first album, The Punchline, in 1981, What Makes a Man Start Fires in 1983, and then Double Nickels on the Dime in 1984. And one of the big ethos that the band adhered to was something they called jamming econo, which meant doing everything as cheap and economical as possible. So they would do things like book studio time after midnight to get a lower rate. They would record over previously used tape that was discarded because it's a little cheaper. They recorded all their songs in the order that they would go in on the record, so they didn't spend money on mixing and like cutting and moving tracks around. They all had day jobs, and so any tours they ever did were just these short little multi-week tours, and then they'd go back home and work some more. But the way they did things, they were generally profitable. They very rarely lost money on the Minutemen, so they were just truly DIY and smart about the decisions that they made. So Double Nickels comes out. It's a hit. Like, it sells really well for an independent record. They get the attention of a lot of music press. Over time, the record just becomes this like legendary album. And so then they decided to release an EP called Project Mersh, which was their kind of tongue-in-cheek attempt at going commercial. And it didn't sell well because the audiences didn't want more commercial sounding music coming from a punk band. And you listen to that record, that EP, and I'm like, this still isn't commercially attractive music. It's just recorded better than they've ever recorded anything before. It's just so funny that album, people turned on it.
Well, it's just like, there's like proper overdubs on the record, and it's a little cleaner and tighter, and the songs are definitely like more structured. But then the record ends on more spiel.
Yeah. Yeah, like the first 2 tracks, like the Cheerleaders and King of the Hill. Yeah. Those are like the poppy songs on the record, but it falls off immediately. Like, it's very clearly, it's just tour spiel and more spiel. Yeah, being on that album. Yeah, they didn't stop being who they were, And so they're like, all right, well, we'll do our next record. Maybe we won't try so much to be as commercial, but we do like working with the same producer, so we're gonna work on this record and still make it sound pretty good. And this record features a number of covers. We have tracks by CCR, BOC, Creedence, and Blue Oyster Cult. There's a Rocky Erickson cover on here. There's a Meat Puppets song and a Urinals song. And this record they had recorded the record, and then they were going to go on tour with the band REM, and then they were going to take a break after the tour and record another record later. And unfortunately, this record comes out in December. They play their last show, December 13th, Charlotte, North Carolina, with REM. I believe they go back home. They start their break. 9 days later, D. Boone dies in a van accident in Arizona. And I'm assuming that was part of the time off. Maybe he was going to Arizona to see some people. And I never really knew the story about why he was in Arizona and not in San Pedro.
I thought they were on their way back from the tour.
No, there was a separate. They weren't together when it happened. I think Mike was home. Mike and George were in California because the band themselves weren't in the accident. It was Boone was in an accident with whoever else he was with.
Yeah, I guess I don't. Yeah, I don't know why they went to Arizona, but
yeah. So it's hard to talk about this record without talking about D Boone's passing, just because it's like it happened right after the album came out and like right after their last tour. So like they're very closely tied because it means that most people probably didn't hear this record till after he was already, gone. I don't think it was like, selling out instantly before, first week is available type stuff. So yeah, for everyone who listened to this record back in the 80s, it probably been right after. So yeah, it's kind of he's always kind of tied to his death and it being the final Minutemen record.
There is a Los Angeles Beat article, an interview with Linda Kite about the accident. I don't know that she says why they were there, but she was driving. She was driving the van. Dee was sleeping in the back seat because he was sick, and her sister Janine was in the car. Her sister was permanently disabled in that accident. Dee was thrown from the van, which I've read this article before, and like the points that I remembered was that she had originally told the cops that she fell asleep because that's what she thought happened, because she just kind of like didn't know exactly what happened. But I want to say there was something about either her dad or maybe even Dee's dad. Yeah, Dennis's father came to talk to me that he put the pieces together. He was a mechanic who went to the tow yard to see the van, and he looked at the wheel axle and saw. He like looked at the tire marks and debris from the police reports, and his conclusion was that the wheel fell off.
Oh wow!
That she didn't fall asleep. She just like was confused in the aftermath of the accident, like
probably concussed. Yeah.
Yeah, and the police were like, "You fell asleep." I'm sure they fed her that, and she was like, "Yeah, I guess."
Because I can't remember what happened. Yeah.
But like he asked her, when did the wheel come off?
Oh, he asked her that. Wow.
So yeah, that's. I guess they were just on a trip. I don't know.
Yeah.
Little hanging out.
Yeah. So this record, it has a cloud on it. They didn't know it at the time, obviously. And I don't feel like there's anything on the record that feels like, oh, they predicted, or ominous or anything like that. It's just, it's hard to not think of this record in direct association with like at a point where they were kind of blowing up. Like doing a tour with REM is huge at this point. Yeah. And they're not even at their height yet. They did Fables of the Reconstruction in '85.
Yeah. Yeah, REM's getting, they're getting radio play, they're getting on TV, but they're not as big as they would get.
Right.
Not by a lot. They still have a lot more to grow. Yeah, this record, it is such a question mark of what would have followed. We know what Fire Hose was, but that's a different thing. There's like an entirely different person playing guitar and singing in that band. Like,
yeah. They had initially planned to do a triple album. They were going to do, it was going to be called 3 Dudes, 6 Sides, half studio, half live. And it was kind of like a tongue in cheek, like poke at Husker Du, which they already did with Double Nickels on the Dime, because Double Nickels on the Dime they found out that Husker Du was doing a double album. So they're like, we can do one too. And so it was just kind of like trying to, copy what Husker Du did. And with the next record being the idea of like, now we're going to do a triple LP, but it was going to be like a half live record and a half studio album. I'm not sure if the live tracks were going to be the same tracks that wound up being on Ballot Result, because with this record, they put in a ballot for fans to put in their like favorite Minutemen songs. And I assume the idea was that they were just going to use old live songs for the live sides, and the studio side would have just been all the new material. Because even then, that's still like an LP and a half of new material they would have to write. So yeah, I don't know exactly. But the ballot results wound up getting used for the album Ballot Result, which was just, a live compilation, collecting a bunch of different live tracks together, putting them together. So yeah, it is kind of interesting. You're like, what is the direction of the Minutemen post 3-way tie? because you're entering a changing landscape of punk and college rock. And I always just kind of assumed, based on like the type of people that Mike Watt wound up like being around and playing with later, that they probably would have gone in similar directions as like Dinosaur Jr. and Camper Van Beethoven were at the same time. Like that mix of like the acoustic folk type stuff with like some noisier guitar rock stuff. Maybe there would be some more Sonic Youth in there as well. I don't know. I don't know what the direction is for Minutemen in the long run. I don't imagine them breaking up for a while. They might have in the 90s, depending on how the career went. But
yeah, I think the likelihood is that as long as Firehose lasted is about as long as the Minutemen would have lasted. Because I think one of the big factors in Firehose ending was that George was done.
Yeah. I think that was the case.
And I think that he would have likely been the deciding factor for the Minutemen kind of like wrapping up. And it's possible that the Minutemen, the relationship that D Boon had with Mike being childhood friends, like, it's possible that the Minutemen would have, I don't think that they would have gone on without George, but they maybe would be able to like do a record every 10 years, 5-10 years or something like that. Like, I don't think that there would have been an outside possibility that the Minutemen would have more records and play occasional shows after breaking up in the 90s, just because D and Mike Watt, I don't think would have fallen out, for any reason.
No. Like, I think D and Mike Watt would have just done what Mike Watt did anyway on his own. Mike Watt had like 9 million other bands he did with like different people. So I think that they would have just, all right, we'll be something different, Yeah.
And they may have just done their own stuff, like, I don't think if they really didn't agree on something, they would just do stuff separately. But I don't think it would be like out of animosity. I think it would just be like truly a creative difference of like, okay, I'm not going to twist your arm and make you do something you don't want to do. They always seem to have like a healthy kind of combative attitude in their creative process together anyway.
Yeah, I think they did argue when they recorded, or when they not recorded. Recording was just like business, get in there and do it. But I do think they probably like fought over songs and like how things would go. But they were like the kind of fights that, longtime childhood friends have, just like you're yelling at each other and then you're fine like later,
Yeah, and then you figure it out and you do it and it's fine. Like, and they always had such a democratic process of like, like the Double Nickels record, the way that the songs are organized on that record are like D picked his songs and D picked the songs he wanted on his side and Mike picked the songs he wanted on his side and George picked the songs he wanted on his side, and then they put the rest on the last side. Like they always had that, okay, yours, mine kind of like splitting things up. So I think the Minutemen would have lasted longer.
I mean, this record, they did the same thing. Like it's a side D, side Mike. Like that's how they did this record. And you can tell in the track listing that that's how the record is laid out. Because you listen to the album, you're like, well, these songs are all Mike Watt songs. Even though Mike has songs on the A side that he wrote, but you could just tell they're Mike Watt songs. Mike Watt has a very particular style of song. Weird. So with this record, revisiting it, what did you think of it?
So I recently, like some late last year, actually listened through the entire Minutemen discography one week. I was like, I feel like listening to the Minutemen. I was like, okay, I'll go start at the beginning. And then I just listened to all of their records in like 3 days.
Yeah.
So I've listened to this record within the context of their full discography very recently. And so then revisiting it for this episode, it was like really easy. And I'm like, I already know all of the songs because I've already listened to this record a ton. And I've really, like I said, like got into this record in the Mersh EP, like in like 2015. And I have a real soft spot for that later material because it's like, man, they were going somewhere really interesting as a band. And I think that they benefited from, and I know it's not like the popular opinion, but I do think they benefited to a degree of a little bit more polish. Not that these records sound like super hi-fi, but like to at least give themselves a little bit more time to do overdubs. I think just like created a lot more possibilities for them. Like I love Double Nickels, and a big part of what I love about Double Nickels is that it is super raw, and you know it's pretty much all recorded live, and it's just the three of them. But when they add in horns or they add in organs or they play with like, you know, like the samples that get used and overlaid on this record, and like it's really interesting stuff that they had the opportunity to do with just a little bit more time and a little bit more money. But there's always just been this like, there's probably some incredible Minutemen record in an alternate universe that comes out in the late 80s or something that's like, you know, one of the most sacred alternative rock documents of all time, but but it just doesn't exist because putting the later material into context of their full discography as recently as I have does show some of the flaws of the later material a little more clearly. And there's flaws on the early material too. There's plenty of skippable stuff on their first few records, but I guess like I've been able to listen to this record a little more objectively, and I can see more of what other people don't like about it, though I love it. And it's definitely like, I think what I've realized is a lot of what I loved about this record is what it suggested they could do more so than what the record actually is. Because there's stuff that I just like, and obviously like they weren't thinking of this as their last record, but like there's definitely stuff you wouldn't put on here if it was gonna be the final Minutemen record. So it is kind of just like a tiny bit of like, just like imperfection of, you know, like, man, I wish this wasn't the last thing. And like, not even just because of like, I wish D Boon was still alive, but just like, I wish that if they had decided to break up and this was the last record, it would still like have that disappointing quality of being like, man, I wish this was just like a tiny bit better. That being said, I still love it.
Yeah, I was actually just kind of curious what people did think of this record as far as their discography goes, and looking at the Rate Your Music, and it's got like a 3.14, and I think that's too low because I do love this record. I've loved this record for a long time, but I can see, you're right, you can see what it is about this album that people probably don't like as much. And yeah, so for me revisiting it, you know, I always try to come into these episodes with a critical eye to the music, and like what if it's a record that I love and have enjoyed for a long time, you know, I try and just like listen to it with as close intentional listening as I can, just to see, you know, like what I've maybe missed before, and to give it kind of just a little bit more of a closer look at to what this record sounds like. And before re-listening to it, I would have said, oh yeah, it's probably like, you know, one of my favorite records they put out. And I do actually still think that it's one of their best records. It's probably not actually better though than What Makes a Man Start Fires or The Punchline. I think they're very different style albums, and their sound had changed quite a bit by that point, but I think what they attempted on those records worked a little better than what they tried here. To me, revisiting this album and listening to it, I'm like, I see what they're doing. They're trying to do Double Nickels again. You know, it's trying to do a little bit of that classic Minutemen sound mixed in with some of the more experimental stuff that they did on Double Nickels, and like some of the more out there ideas. They also like included a lot of covers on here, which Double Nickels has a bunch of covers on too. So it's like taking Double Nickels, shrinking it to a single LP, but still maintaining that variety the Double Nickels had. Because I think if you just take Double Nickels and you try and shrink it to one LP, you're just going to get a monster banger record front to back. And you're probably going to wind up dropping a lot of the more experimental stuff. Because there were just so many good songs on that record.
Yeah. Listening to this record after having listened to everything before it, and going through their discography the way that I did, I was like, it gave me more appreciation for the earlier material, which I haven't like dug into as much. But yeah, What Makes a Man Start Fires. Holy shit, that's a great record.
Yeah, right.
and that's the thing where like I maybe can find like the marks against Three-Way Tie, where like in the past, and like to this day, you know, like we said, it's not. I don't think Three-Way Tie today is still recognized for as good of a record as it is. I think it is an underrated record, an underappreciated record. I think that people who don't like them going in the slightly more commercial and polished direction, slightly, because this has Henry Rollins talking over samples of helicopters about
I think that's
man
Mike.
versus. Oh, is it Mike? It is Mike.
It is
He
Mike.
sounds like Henry.
He sounds just like Henry Rollins, especially this
It
era.
sounds like he's doing a Henry Rollins spoken word parody.
I wonder if he is. You know, that would be like them. You know, because they're always poking fun at Husker Du. But I think they were genuine fans of that band because they signed them to like New Alliance Records. So like, yeah, I think they were fans of Husker Du. So they're always poking fun. I bet they made fun of Black Flag in their van. You know, like I'm sure they did. And so yeah, that song does feel like a Henry Rollins spoken word on.
It's Mike. I think it is Mike doing a Henry Rollins.
It's his Family Man.
Because Family Man would have been released probably like, was that 84?
I think so,
Yeah.
right? That's like the same year. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, like I think a lot more people recognize What Makes a Man Starts Fire as being like a great record, and like, you know, the build up to Double Nickels. And then I think in comparison, Three-Way Tie is not recognized enough as being like learning what they did from doing the Project Mersh EP and applying it to a Double Nickels style record. And it like doesn't quite hit as well as Double Nickels, but I think they were figuring out. I think they were figuring out on this record how to make the next Minutemen records. And yeah, Mike does kind of like weird up the B-side. So the sequencing gets a little wacky, and you just got like, you know.
Yeah, I'm with you that this record is underrated. I do think people don't give it a chance that it deserves. It is definitely a better record than its perception. And maybe that comes down to, you know, the people who've heard. I mean, I would safely assume that a majority of people who have heard this record heard it years later. Just, you know, statistically, that just has to be the possibility. So they would have probably absorbed all of the Minutemen discography at the same time, or at least in bits and pieces, the way we did it. So yeah, when you listen to it in full context of their entire discography, it's probably not going to stand out nearly as much. But on its own, I think it's a great record. Like I really love this album, despite it being real weird in a lot of places. Despite it being a very uneven record. I think it's funny that this record has like almost as many covers on it as Double Nickels. I think Double Nickels actually only has like 3 covers, like 3 straight up covers. Whereas this one has 4 like full covers of songs. And so it's like, it feels like you're taking up some real estate that maybe you could have used for something else. Yeah. But also it's kind of what makes them too, you know?
Well, because they played covers. They played covers live.
Yeah.
Like the Don't Look Now cover on Double Nickels is like a live recording, and they would play. They did Have You Ever Seen the Rain, and they did The Red and the Black on this record because those were songs they covered live. Those were songs that they would play.
I mean, Ack 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 was like a show staple.
Yeah.
For a long time. And it finally got recorded for this album.
So they were just like, yeah, let's do the, you know, proper recordings of these. And then there's like, you know, Bermuda is like not even, it's not really a full, it's just like a little tape recording of.
Yeah, it's a phone call.
Playing it over the phone.
Yeah, it's a phone call recording. Though, on Ballot Result, I don't know if you ever listened to that, they do a version of Bermuda on there. Holy shit, it fucking rules. Like
Yeah.
they just go, they did it on stage, so it's got the full band sound, and like it's not just that. I guess it's acoustic on the phone of the.
Yeah.
But they went full band. It sounds amazing. Like it's like, man, why didn't you actually record it that way on the record? Like I get what they were going for. They were going for a Rocky Erickson type thing.
Yeah.
But the live version is superior to the album version of that song. Yeah, I mean,
So this B-side really
Yeah.
does end so weird, though, because it's like, I mean, it starts with the Red and Black on the B-side, so it's a cover, but it fucking rips. I mean, I'm glad they recorded it the way they did, because it sounds great.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. I love that cover.
Their spoken word piece, No One's kind of more, of a slower song.
Yeah, No One is just them repeating no one over and over again, to the point where on Ballot Result, the live version of that song, it's a sample of their voice saying no one. So I'm assuming George is hitting it, maybe playing that song, basically. Yeah, you're right, because then it goes, okay, Stories, acoustic. What Is It? It's pretty acoustic, kind of flamenco-y. Then they throw Ack Ack Ack, which is just like a super short cover.
Just Another Soldier's another slow song.
Mm-hmm. Situation at Hand is like a weird song that's just like weird and arty, but then has a really cool outro for some reason.
Yeah, it's just a little instrumental noodle. The Spotify listing has the track listings wrong with Bermuda and Hitting the Bong title tracks wrong. But then Hitting the Bong is just a little
it's like
classical guitar piece, and then the phone recording of Are You Going to Bermuda?
So yeah, the sides are pretty uneven. I think the A side is definitely the stronger side. Price of Paradise, Lost, that's the Meat Puppets cover. The Big Stick, which is a pretty fun song. Political Nightmare is it's like a heavier song, a little long. But then Courage is another pretty fun song, decent energy to it. And then they end with Have You Ever Seen the Rain on that side. So yeah, the D side is the stronger side. So that being said, this record also features Kira Rossler, who was Mike Watts. I don't know if they were married yet at this point, but they were a couple at least at this stage. And so almost all of the Mike Watts songs on this record are co-written by her. And if you know anything about the project they did together, Dose, it kind of makes sense why all their songs sound like that, because that's just how Dose songs sound.
Yeah. And that's why the first Firehose record's pretty weird.
Yeah.
Because it's leftover Dose material.
Because on the side D, we have 3 original D Boon songs, 2 covers, and he does sing Political Nightmare, which is the Kira and Mike song. And then on the B side, they're all covers and Kira and Mike Watt songs, except for Just Another Soldier. That's the only Boon song on the B side. So I guess they just each took a song from each other to put on there. Though Mike Watt only sings on like 2 songs. Does he sing on 2 songs even? He sings the Red and the Black, and he does the spoken word. But does he sing any of the other songs? I don't think he does. He might do some backing vocals, but I don't think he does lead. Oh, he does Bermuda as well.
Yeah.
But even most of the other songs that are written by Kira and Mike, D sings them. So yeah, that's kind of interesting to see. I mean, that partly might be why this record's so weird, is because Kira's co-writing some of these songs, and it's like now you got 2 bass players writing songs on on the records. So yeah, that's interesting. We have some other people on the record. Joe Beza of Saccharine Trust plays guitar on Situations at Hand. He does the lead guitars on that one for like the first 2 parts. And then Ethan James, the producer, plays Linn drums on What Is It? I'm not sure what Linn drums are. Do you know what those are?
Electric drums. It would have been it's funny that they had a Linn drum. That was an expensive drum machine in the 80s.
So just like a little drum machine then. Okay.
Yeah. Programmable. It was like one of the early like high-end fully programmable drum machines. I didn't want to say used samples rather than just being like most drum machines before were just like a white noise generator, just kind of like tuned.
It also says
trying to think of Prince used the Linn drum a lot.
It also says that Ethan played the Vietnam battlefield tape on the spoken word piece. So maybe he's doing some tape manipulation with that one, or maybe he just cut it together and they gave him a credit for that.
Ethan James, you mentioned of Blue Cheer, also notable, I think, for being trying to figure out what his big production credits would be. I mean, he worked a lot with Minutemen. He engineered some Descendants stuff. He produced New Wind by 7 Seconds. Seems like he did pretty much all of the Fire Hose stuff, or at least the first few. He produced Been Caught Stealing by Jane's Addiction.
Oh, that's probably his biggest, most well-known record he's probably worked on then.
That's single. I would have thought he did more. Huh.
Yeah, I mean, he had the studio, Radio Tokyo, which they made some compilations too, and a lot of people recorded at his studio. So maybe his contribution seems to be more the it's my studio, people come use it. A lot of acoustic on this record. There's a lot of acoustic stuff on here, and I don't know if we would have just seen more of that going forward. But I also so if you were to turn this into a double album with the Project Mersh, like we say that's a double album with both of those, Mersh side, Econo side. I don't know how that would label the other side, but both of these records are kind of like both sides of the coin when it comes to the Minutemen sound. Project Mersh is better recorded and spent more time with it, more produced of a record. But that record also features some of the more catchier and poppier elements of their sound, which you could see on a record like Double Nickels having songs like This Ain't No Picnic, or this is a song for Michael Jackson to sing, political song for Michael Jackson to sing, and that EP feels like it represents the poppier side, and then this LP feels like and here's all the other weird stuff we did on Double Nickels that's not the most poppy stuff. Because really, even though the A side is like the catchier, but more fun side to listen to, it's not super poppy either. The acoustic songs are pretty catchy. Those feel a little more upbeat, but yeah, even the other song like Courage and Political Nightmare, they're not the most poppy things. The Meat Puppet song is probably one of the poppiest songs on the whole record. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting record to look at in their entire discography. It's not, revisiting it, it's not as good as my memory of the record is, but I do still just really enjoy the direction they went with this album. And really makes you wonder what that next one was going to be like. They could have gone even weirder going forward. And looking at what all Mike Watt has done post Minutemen on his own, they probably would have gotten really weird. And there's maybe a chance that they put out records that you and I are not fans of.
Yeah, I think the reason that Fire Hose has as many catchy songs as they have is because of the other guy.
Yeah, Ed
I
Crawford,
don't think that was where Mike was going.
Yeah, Ed from Ohio. You could tell Ed from Ohio is more like a D Boon because the type of songs he was writing compared to what Mike was putting on those records. Because Mike puts even weirder shit on those Fire Hose records than he did on any Minutemen album. And it's partly why I don't love Fire Hose. I think Ed couldn't say no to Mike as much.
Right. Because Fire Hose was such a reluctant band.
Right.
Mike kind of didn't want to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because after D died, Mike got, super depressed and he wanted to quit music. But apparently Sonic Youth was the ones to convince him to keep going. And so he did that one record with them, like Siccone Waste or something like that. I don't remember the name of it. But it's basically just all of Sonic Youth plus Mike Watt. And then the story came out that one of the guys in Camper Van Beethoven told Ed from Ohio that Minutemen are hiring a new bassist. And he went, did he call him? He found his phone number, right? He didn't actually just show up in LA or San Pedro, did he? I can't remember how that story went, but either way, he gets in touch with Mike Watt either in person or on the phone, and Mike's like, "What? No, we're not doing the Minutemen again. What are you talking about? That's not a thing." And he's like, "Oh, okay. Well, do you still want to do something?" And I think the fact that he could play just like D Boon is the reason why they decided to go for it. But yeah, he's very clearly was a student of D Boon and not so much a Mike Watt type of player. And I guess George just never says no to any ideas. So I feel like George has done a bunch of weird records with Mike too, all the million projects they've had together.
Yeah, I mean, I think George was kind of mostly along for the ride creatively. As long as he could get a groove going, I
Yeah.
think he was pretty happy.
Yeah, he definitely. I should go. Out of shits and giggles, I kind of want to see what's on Side George on Double Nickels, because I can't really remember like whose songs are on which side. So Side George, he took This Ain't No Picnic, Politics of Time, Roar Masses Could Be Farts, You Need the Glory. He may have taken some weird stuff too. Looking at it now, looks like he took more Watt songs than Boone songs. So that kind of tracks with their later material, because I think he wants to like experiment too as a drummer. They're playing around with like jazz and funk in their sound. SST 1985, a pretty big year for the label, maybe one of the last like really big years. But in 1985, they also released Loose Nut and In My Head by Black Flag. So we have 2 Black Flag records. We have New Day Rising and Flip Your Wig by Husker Du. So that's 2 Husker Du records. They have this and Project Mersh, the 2 Minutemen records. We have the Meat Puppets, Up on the Sun. And then we have albums from a ton of bands that no one knows. Listen to these names. Stop Me When You Recognize One. Oh, they did a Saccharine Trust record. You know that one.
Okay.
But stop me when you recognize one of these names. Angst, Zoog's Rift, October Faction, DC3, SWA, Tom Tricoli's Dog.
Who was SWA?
So SWA is Chuck Dukowski and Ray Cooper of the Descendants.
Right. I knew somebody from SWA.
There's Verm.
Yeah. Also members of SWA.
Also Chuck Dukowski. And Overkill, but not that Overkill. This is an Overkill that just had like 1 EP. That's it.
October Faction was...
That was a
Chuck,
Greg Ginn
Bill.
jam band. I could not want to hear something less.
Henry Rollins Percussion.
DC3 is a Des Cadena band. Tom Tricoli's Dog, that is Black Flag's roadie. He got his own record, and like I think Chuck's on it too. Like Chuck's on like half these records. Zoog's Rift is was I don't know what that one even was, but the guy wound up being a pro wrestling promoter later and worked for the UWF, which there's an entire Dark Side of the Ring about Herb Abrams and the UWF, and Herb Abrams was just like this chaotic, guy, super high on cocaine all the time, who was creating a challenger brand to WWF and the NWA at the time, and was just a maniac. So it's very funny that guy is tied, like a SST musician is tied to that wrestling company. So that's 2 wrestlers, wrestling connections, because Bob Mould was on the writing committee in WCW. There was also a St. Vitus record that year, but it's also like it's one of those Riegers records that I probably have never actually listened to, called like Hollows something.
Yeah, Hallows Victim. It's like the second St. Vitus record.
Yeah.
The one right before Wino joins.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a combination of like some of the biggest bands on the record label's history, putting out later era material, not their best, especially the Black Flag stuff. Actually, the Husker Du stuff is some of their best, so they're kind of right in the pocket. But yeah, those Black Flag records are not their best. And then a bunch of weird Chuck Dukowski side projects, Black Flag spin-off bands.
Yeah, I mean, SWA has like 5 records, so that's one of the more notable of the obscure.
Yeah,
I've
for
never
sure.
listened to SWA though,
No,
and I don't know if you can.
it's probably like a YouTube rip somewhere, but yeah.
I don't know if any SWA stuff is on Spotify. That'd be
I-
a YouTube core.
Man, there is so much of the SST catalog that I've never heard.
There's a couple. There's a disc Evolution 85 to 87 compilation in volume from 1991. That's the only SWA stuff.
It might be a Soulseek core. Go find the files somewhere. But I bet so much of it is terrible. Like, I've never listened to it, and I feel like most of those records are not good. Because Greg was like in his like acid and weed phase, and so like everything had to be jazz.
Yeah.
I bet a lot of that's terrible to listen to. But if you're familiar with any of those records, hit us up and let us know if any of them are any good. We're checking out. So yeah, D Boone dies, the band breaks up, and they never reunite because they never wanted to become a vampire version of the Minutemen, is how Mike described it. He's like, we're not going to bring in anybody to play Demon's parts. There have been occasions where George and Mike got together and played Minutemen songs live. What they did, they refused to call it Minutemen. They wouldn't let anybody play the guitar parts. They rearranged all the songs for just bass and drums.
Just bass and drums.
Yeah. And they refused. They've made them be billed as Mike Watt and George Hurley, like on the bills. So they held true to that. They never did get that band back together. I guess because Firehose kind of took the place. They started Firehose not long after, like maybe a year later. They're already doing Firehose, and so that band kind of took the place of the Minutemen as far as their like full-time music focus. But Mike Watt has a million solo records and side projects, and he's done projects with George Hurley a bunch of times. I'm really not a fan of most of Mike Watt's non-Minutemen material, but I also, to be fair, have not listened to most of it. So I should dig and see if there's some hidden gems out there that I've never heard.
Yeah, it looks like that. I don't even know if the last time they did Mike Watt and George Hurley was like 2012, probably.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Has Firehose ever? They had a 2012 reunion.
Yeah.
Which I kind of wonder why that band never did more, you know?
I don't know how old this picture is, but like the most recent pictures of George Hurley I can find, he's just got solid white hair.
Yeah. Yeah, he does. Yeah. I don't think I knew. Ed Crawford was in like a North Carolina band called Grand National, and then he played in Whiskeytown. Like he was a touring guitarist. That's weird. He lives in Pittsburgh now, but that means he was still like North Carolina centric for a period there. That's funny.
He played with Southern Culture on the Skids.
Interesting.
At some point.
But yeah, there's tons of Mike Watt stuff out there. So if you're ever curious, there's a lot. There's a lot to get through. What the fuck? Grand National, Ed Crawford, Jenny Snyder, John Worster, Laura King. They have no records. That's wild. What's Jenny Snyder? Jenny Snyder, I think that's her only note. But John Worster, Superchunk drummer, and Laura King, now Superchunk drummer. But Laura King's in Bad Fangs, and she's been in a million other bands too. But yeah, that's weird. I had no idea. Well, any final thoughts on this record?
No. I think that's it. I think we said it all.
Yeah. Well, let's give it a rating. I'm gonna go. I think I'm gonna give it a 4.25. I think that's where I'm gonna sit at with this album.
I have it as a 4.5. I do love it. You know, I
do love
it has its flaws, but I love the record, and I love that it has its flaws, which is kind of like every Minutemen record. Because honestly, if you're completely honest, there's stuff on Double Nickels on the Dime that if it wasn't that album, you would skip it.
Yeah. If some of those tracks were just like plopped in the middle of a Black Flag record, yeah, you'd skip it.
Yeah, but it's just it's part and parcel. You know, it's all the final product.
Yeah, it's part of the listening experience of that record. That is a record you are meant to listen to all the weird interstitials.
You're supposed to listen to the things they're not playing.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that will do it for us. So thank you all so much for listening. And you can follow us on all forms of social media at PunkLottoPod, patreon.com/PunkLottoPod, our voicemail line 202-688-PUNK, and our email address punklotopod@gmail.com. So thank you all so much, and we will talk to you next time.
To order Punk, call the number on your screen. Rush delivery is available. Remember, this special offer is not sold in stores.